There we are. Let me just turn off my mute button. Hello, everyone in Global Communication 1. I hope you're enjoying the festival. Today's lecture, our makeup lecture for today's class, is going to have two parts. First, I'd like to give you some feedback on your narrative essays to help you improve your narrative writing. And I would also like to talk about cause and effect writing. This is the original plan for today's class. Before I realized the festival was on. All right, so let's get started. Okay, overall, I think people did quite well on their narrative essays, and it was a pleasure to read all of them. Please check not only your score, but also your feedback. There were a number of students that I tried to give a little bit of extra feedback to, for those that either had exceptional difficulty or those that had done an essay that I thought was exceptionally well written. However, because I have so many students, it's very hard to give individualized feedback to every single student. So instead, what I've done is I've made a compilation here of what I consider to be the best advice that I could give that would benefit the most people. And I'm also going to talk about some of the sentences that I found in your writing and how I would fix each of the mistakes in each case. So let's start off by just having some general feedback. First off, the introduction. I think one of the hardest things to do is to have your narrative essay start well. Trust me, if you don't start it well and get a very good sense of who you are and what you're going to write about in the introduction, you're going to lose the reader's interest, and you're also going to lose your own focus as you continue to write the essay. Remember what an introduction is supposed to do. Introduce. It should introduce the narrator. And when I say introduce the narrator, I mean it should tell me a little bit about who you are, where the incident happened, a little bit of background, just so I get a sense of who you are and why this experience was important to you. You don't need to tell me too much, and you don't need to say, on December 23rd, 2022, I was in this dong, in this gu, in this city. You don't need to have that much detail, but I should get a general sense of how old you are or how old you were when the incident happened. And I should also get a sense of any important information that I need to know before you tell me the main event. Let's say, for example, if you are afraid of heights and then you went bungee jumping. The fact that you were afraid of heights is definitely something that you should include in your introduction. That way, when you talk about going bungee jumping, I can appreciate how difficult the experience was. Also, don't tell me exactly what happened. If the significant event or memorable day was breaking up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, for example, first love, first heartbreak, something like that. Don't tell me that you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend in the introduction. Remember, an introduction should get the reader interested. It shouldn't satisfy their interest. Don't summarize the main event. Actually, you shouldn't even tell me what the main event necessarily is going to be. It should just create tension so that I want to continue reading more. Then you move into the body of your essay, and this might be one long paragraph or two, three, or several paragraphs, but each paragraph should tell an important part of the story, and they should follow sequentially, 1, 2, 3, 4. They should follow each other chronologically, make it easy to follow. It's very good if you just concentrate either on one single event that happened, or if you're talking about two different events, they should be very, very closely connected. One weakness that I found in the story, one weakness that I found in a few students' essays was they sometimes talked about two different events, but by talking about two different events, it actually made it hard to concentrate on one or the other, and they both came off sounding a little bit weaker. Let's say, for example, if you are writing about taking the Sunung for a second time. I would say it would be a better idea to tell me that you didn't do very well the first time in the introduction, and then set up the body to talk about the day when you wrote it for the second time. There wouldn't be any benefit to writing about both times you took the test in the body of the essay itself, because the memorable moment, or the significant memory, is actually taking it for the second time. A good narrative essay has a strong sense of focus. It knows what it wants to talk about. Try to use descriptive language too, so the reader can experience the event just like you did. Now, there are different ways to do this. Some people will focus on adjectives and try to give us lots of sensory language, so we can smell, see, and hear what the person experienced that day. Other people will try to zero in on a short period of time and give us moment-by-moment descriptions, so we can really feel like we're experiencing this just as the writer did. There's no single correct way to do this. You have to decide that for yourself. Just remember, the body should be focused on the main event and doesn't include too many unrelated details that would slow down or bog down the story. Finally, the conclusion. Conclusions should be very brief. Think about your favorite movie. The movie will have a climax, which is the most exciting part of the film. It's where all of the tension gets resolved, all of the problems get solved, usually. And then there's just maybe a short scene afterwards where you find out what happens to the characters in the aftermath. That's what a good conclusion for a narrative essay should be too. You don't want to linger for too long. Just write a short paragraph and tell us what happened as a result of the main event, what happened after. Tell us why it was significant to you, and don't include any more details. Just wrap it up and finish it. A good conclusion should be brief. Keep it concrete, keep it clear, and keep it concise. All right, so to wrap up, just a couple of general tips. Whenever you do, well, narrative essays, know what the main event is. Know what you're going to focus on. That should really help you when you decide what information to put in the introduction, what's necessary for us to know before we hear about the main event, and why it's significant for you. It's a good idea to give any background that's necessary in the introduction, and then it's over. Now we can just focus on the main event, whether it's a turning point or some kind of milestone, or just a day that was very, very memorable. Remember that simple is better. You don't need to use long words or long sentences, although I do strongly suggest that students try very hard to vary their sentence length. Have a short sentence and then a long sentence, then a medium sentence, and then a short sentence and then a long sentence. This can create a much more interesting rhythm for the reader. If you just have short, simple sentence, short, simple sentence, short, simple sentence continuously, that can get very boring for the reader. There's nothing wrong with having a simple writing style, but you have to know how to spice it up too. So just having subject, verb, object, subject, verb, object, subject, verb, object, sentence after sentence, that's going to become very boring for the reader. Make sure that you also have a clear distinction between your introduction and your body, your first body paragraph. This was something that a number of students really didn't do as well as they could have. The introduction basically began with the background to their lives and then moved very quickly into the main event. But I didn't get a sharp, clear thesis statement at the end of the introduction. It just seemed like I was joining the story halfway through, and that's not a good narrative essay. What you want to do is have each part be clearly delineated. That means have it clearly distinguished from section to section. The easiest way to do this is to put your thesis statement at the end of your introduction. A thesis statement will usually give us a hint about what's going to happen and why it was so important. This is good because it sets up the main event, and it also separates the background information from what's going to happen in the body. Go back and read your narrative essay and think, is there a clear difference between the introduction and the first body paragraph? If you look at that, the end of your introduction and the beginning of the body of your essay, can you clearly see a shift? Because that's what there should be. A quick note about using AI or ChatGPT, or actually any other sort of software to use your writing. Typically, I discourage students from using it because I think that people grow as not only as writers, but also as human beings by engaging in the writing process. And I think by using artificial intelligence to write your essays for you, you're actually missing out on the most valuable part of the creative process, which is using your imagination to put words on the page. Another thing is you deny yourself the ability to create your own specific voice. A good writer has a very distinctive style, and that's not going to happen if you just use AI. ChatGPT in particular has a very distinctive voice, and it's not a very good narrative voice, if I have to tell the truth there. A lot of ChatGPT generated writing has a very flowery tone. It uses a lot of words and expressions that I think are quite unnatural for students to use. This is why sometimes when I read a student's writing, I will come across expressions, certain idioms that I think I'm 100% sure that this student did not write that. Why? Because it might be an expression that is not typically used by people under 40 or 50 years old. It might be quite old-fashioned. Or it might just be the sort of expression that you would never hear out of someone whose mother tongue was not English. I don't expect students to write as well as native speakers, and I have no problem giving top marks to students that have a few mistakes in their work. Using ChatGPT, I think, eventually is going to cause students to have much poorer and weaker writing skills. So I would strongly suggest you don't use it. But if you do use it, a good thing to do would be to have it as your first draft. And then you've got to go in and then spend the time editing it, putting it into your own voice. The worst thing you could possibly do is just get ChatGPT to write it for you and then submit it. Okay, so now let's take a look at some specific sentences which were clearly not generated by ChatGPT, and let's see what was wrong with them and how we can fix them. First, talking about the past. Remember, narrative essays are geared towards past events. That's what they're supposed to talk about. So you have to make sure you're distinguishing between the past and the present. It was my first week in the USA, and I expected to go to school next week. Next week is something that you would use if you're talking about now. But if you're talking about an event in the past and plans for the future, then you would say the following week. I expected to start school the following week. Awkward expressions. Every once in a while, I come upon an awkward expression, and I think, I want to teach the student how to write this correctly. One student talked about how they grew much closer with their family as the result of a very difficult experience. And they said their familyship became stronger. Now, familyship is not actually an expression that we use in English. You could say we became closer as a family, our bonds as a family grew stronger, but not familyship. Remember that you should use the past tense, and you have to be careful how you use it. Always stick with it. Take a look here. The journey back then was a real turning point. Not only was it introduced to Europe, but also, etc., etc. Now, the person here is looking back on a trip they took to Europe and how it was a real turning point in their life. However, I wouldn't say the journey back then. I would say the trip. And I don't need to say back then either. I'm already writing in the past tense. Remember, a journey is maybe going on the plane from point A to point B, but actually traveling around, that is the trip. And it was a turning point. When you say was, then you don't need to say back then. Not only did it introduce, remember, introduce is an action verb, so you would use do as the predicate. Not only did it introduce me to Europe, but it also broadened my mind, for example. Oh, be careful about using to when you're talking about processes. In this case, I want to show you how you can use to, T-O-O, meaning an unpleasant extreme, and to, meaning intention. I was too busy when I went to middle school and high school. My sister has grown up fast before I noticed. I wouldn't say my sister has grown up fast because that includes from the past up until now. What I would do is combine these two sentences, just maintaining the past and past continuous tenses, and using to. I was too busy in middle school and high school to notice how quickly my sister was growing up. Was growing up because she was growing up during the middle school and high school years. This was a continuous process. Next, talking another about processes. Yeah, you talk about performing a role, for example, in a musical or play. And a number of students talked about performing in musicals or plays. Then you could talk about immersing yourself. In this case, I wouldn't say I immersed in the role. I would say I immersed myself in the role, using the reflexive pronoun myself. I became immersed in the role, a process of becoming immersed, or I was immersed in the role. All right, next, the difference between few and a few. I opened the test paper, but there were few problems I could solve. First of all, I probably wouldn't say test paper. I would probably say test booklet, because the tests that I think the students were talking about was a multi-page exam that you would open up, and there was often like the first page, actually, you just put your name on it. You don't actually write questions. It's like a little book. So we call it a booklet. Next, when you write the word few, the emphasis is on the small number, and it implies a deficiency of some kind. Something is not enough. There were few problems that I could solve. That would mean the vast majority of them I couldn't. There were a few problems I could solve. This emphasizes like, oh, maybe I didn't think I could really answer any, but actually there were some that I could solve. It emphasizes that there are some problems that you could solve. A few emphasizes the presence of something. Few emphasizes the small number that you have, and has a negative connotation. I have a few friends. That's good. I've got a few friends. I've got a few people, and there's value in that number, even though it's not many. I have few friends. That means I have almost no friends, and that emphasizes there's some kind of lack or insufficiency in the number. Using the, okay. Tomorrow is English exam. Whenever you're talking about subjects in school and discussing exams, make sure you put the article the in front. Tomorrow is English exam? No, tomorrow is the English exam. Or the English exam is tomorrow. Try to avoid repeating information as well. This is something that I noticed students do when they don't have a lot to write about, and they think, well, the professor wants me to have a longer piece of writing, so I will just take one sentence and expand it into 3. You do that enough, and very quickly you have a full essay. It's poor writing, however. I enjoyed making friends with other different people. Other and different, combine that. Of course, I had a best friend named blank. We were inseparable, always doing everything together. Well, if you're inseparable, you are doing everything together, so combine that too. I could actually combine all of this into a much shorter piece of writing. Although I enjoyed making friends, I was closest to this person. We were inseparable. You'll notice that I include the exact same meaning. There's nothing left out, but it's much more economical with the words. I like to think that good writing is like a steak that's had all of the fat trimmed off. You know, you don't want to have all the fat hanging onto it. You want it to be meaty. You want it to be solid. So if there's any way that you can condense your writing, make it more clear, more concrete, more concise, I think that makes you a much more effective writer. Next, using irregular verbs. Always make sure you know how to conjugate. When I faced a difficult problem, I digged into one problem for hours. Dig, dug, dug. When I faced a difficult problem, I dug into it for hours. By the way, you'll also notice here, rather than repeat the word problem, when I faced a difficult problem, I digged into one problem for hours. I just replace it with the pronoun it. When I faced a difficult problem, I dug into it for hours. This makes it much less repetitive and much more interesting for the reader. Here's an interesting expression. I felt my stomach was wrong. Stomach, you are wrong. Now, in this case, if you eat something and then you feel sick afterwards, your stomach doesn't feel wrong, although there is something wrong with your stomach. You could say you had an upset stomach. And I think this expression is quite funny because we think of someone is upset, you know, maybe they're very emotional and they're crying. They've had a bad experience. Well, your stomach can be upset too, at least in English. All right, and before I go on to today's cause and effect lesson, I just want to talk a little bit about how to discuss charity. After listening to students in my classes discuss charity and look at different questions, here are some things that I think you should pay attention to. If you do donate to charity on occasion, you could say, I sometimes donate to charity. But if you don't anymore, but maybe you used to in the past, you could just say, I used to donate money to charity. Or I donate once a year or once every so often. If you don't have the experience at all, then you could say, I have never donated money to charity. I've never donated. Discussing the responsibility. Oh, this is something that came up in one or two classes. Do rich countries have a responsibility to help less developed countries? If you want to argue yes, that rich countries do have a moral responsibility, you could say, I think rich countries have a responsibility to help less developed countries. Or if you don't think so, if you disagree, you could say, I don't think rich countries have a responsibility to help less developed countries. This is an interesting moral issue. One of the questions that came up was, would it be more effective to donate money to a homeless charity or give money directly to a homeless person on the street? Well, you could say it like this. I think it is more effective to give money to a homeless charity than give money directly to a homeless person on the street. Or you could switch the order. Or if you just want to emphasize the negative, you could say, I don't think giving money to a homeless person on the street is very effective. Whatever your opinion is, it's yours. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I'll stop